The crystal towers of Ethermore reached high into the purple sky like frozen lightning. Inside the tallest spire, Elder Counselor Lyralay Moonwhisper stood before a circle of ancient elves. Her silver hair flowed down to her feet, and her eyes glowed with the wisdom of 3,000 years. The other council members sat in chairs made of pure starlight, their faces serious and worried. Lyralay raised her hand and the room became silent. My fellow elders, disturbing news comes from the outer worlds. Ships are disappearing. Entire fleets vanish without sending any messages. The trade routes that have been safe for centuries now echo with silence. Elder Thrandiel Stormcaller, whose beard sparkled with tiny stars, leaned forward. Pirates, perhaps. The Corvin raiders have grown bold lately. No, Lyralay shook her head. This is different. The energy readings make no sense. These attacks use technology we do not understand. A shimmer filled the air near the council chamber. Doors. Captain Zara Voidstrider materialized from her transport beam. Her 4 silver arms crossed over her chest. The Krillian warrior stood 8 feet tall, her blue-black scales catching the light from the crystal walls. 2 curved horns grew from her forehead, and her yellow eyes burned with intensity. Honored elves, Zara spoke in her deep voice. I bring greetings from the Galactic Coalition. We need to talk. Elder Lyralay nodded. Captain Voidstrider, you are welcome here. What brings you to our peaceful world? Zara activated a device on her wrist. Holographic images filled the center of the room. The elves gasped as they saw star systems going dark, one by one. Massive ships appeared briefly. In the recordings before everything went black. 17 systems have gone silent in the past month, Zara explained. No distress calls. No survivors. Just empty space where thriving worlds used to be. Elder Thrandiel studied the holograms. These could be natural disasters. Solar flares, perhaps, or gravitational anomalies. Look closer. Zara pointed to one image. These energy signatures. They match nothing in our databases. The weapons that destroyed these fleets use technology that should not exist. Far below the council chamber, in the gardens of the lower city, Mira Starweaver tended to the singing flowers. The young elf moved between the glowing plants, her long green hair braided with silver thread. At only 200 years old, she was barely an adult by elven standards. But lately, her dreams had been filled with visions that frightened her. She touched a moon blossom, and it chimed like a bell. The sound reminded her of the metal ships from her nightmares, ships that blocked out the stars and carried creatures, that walked on 2 legs like the ancient stories described. Grandmother, Mira called to the old elf sitting by the crystal pond. The dreams came again last night. Arya Dawnkeeper looked up from her meditation. At 5,000 years old, she was the oldest living elf on Ethermore. Her white hair seemed to glow with its own light, and her ancient eyes held secrets from the early days of the galaxy. Tell me about these dreams, child. Mira sat beside her grandmother on the soft grass. I see metal ships, bigger than our cities. They move through space, like hunters, destroying everything they find. And the creatures inside them, they look almost like us, but with no points to their ears and strange pale skin. Arya's face grew pale. What else do you see in these dreams? Fire and darkness, worlds burning, and then silence. As if whole civilizations just stopped existing. Mira shivered despite the warm air. Grandmother, what are these visions? The old elf was quiet for a long moment. Then she stood and walked to a hidden panel in the garden wall. Her hand pressed against the crystal surface, and it slid open, revealing a chamber filled with ancient books and scrolls. Come with me, Mira. It is time you learned about the old wars. They entered the secret archive. Dust motes danced in the light from glowing crystals set into the walls. Arya pulled out a book bound in black metal, its pages yellow with age. Long ago, before your grandfather's grandfather was born, there was a race that nearly conquered the entire galaxy. They called themselves humans. Mira felt a chill run down her spine. Humans are just legends, stories to frighten children. No, child, they were very real. Arya opened the book, showing images of bipedal creatures with round ears and varying skin colors. They came from a world called Earth, somewhere in the Outer Rim. They spread across the stars like a plague, conquering world after world. The pages showed battle scenes, human ships attacking elven crystal vessels, cities burning under human weapons, armies of the strange creatures marching across alien landscapes. Their technology was beyond anything we had seen. They could build ships the size of moons. They could destroy planets with single weapons. They were driven by something we did not understand, a hunger for expansion that never ended. What happened to them? Mira whispered. They disappeared. 3,000 years ago, at the height of their power, they simply vanished. Some say they destroyed themselves. Others believe they found something in the dark between the stars that even they could not defeat. Above them in the council chamber, warning alarms began to sound. The crystal walls pulsed with red light as the planetary defense systems activated. Elder Lyralay's face went white as she read the energy readings. Impossible. These signatures, they match the ancient records. Captain Zara's four hands moved quickly over her equipment. Massive energy distortions on the edge of the system. Something big is coming through hyperspace. How many ships? Elder Thrandiel asked. Zara's yellow eyes widened. Not ships, fleets, hundreds of them. Through the crystal walls, they could see the stars beginning to flicker. One by one, points of light appeared in the darkness. But these were not stars. They were the running lights of vessels so large they could be seen with the naked eye from the planet's surface. In the garden below, Arya and Mira felt the ground shake as the planet's shields powered up. The old elf closed the ancient book with shaking hands. "They have returned," Arya whispered. "After 3,000 years of silence, the humans have come back." Mira looked up at the sky, where hundreds of lights now filled the darkness. Her dreams had been real. The metal ships from her nightmares were here, surrounding their peaceful world with technology beyond imagination. The age of legends was over. The age of humans had begun again. Admiral Lisa Carter stood on the bridge of the UHS Determination, watching the blue and silver world of Ethermore grow larger on the main screen. The massive ship hummed with power as its quantum engines held position at the edge of the star system. Around her, hundreds of other human vessels formed a defensive grid, their dark hulls gleaming with energy shields. Lisa touched the command console with her gloved hand. At 45 years old, she had spent most of her life preparing for this moment. Her brown hair was pulled back in a military style, and her green eyes showed the weight of command. She wore the dark blue uniform of the human colonial navy, with 5 silver stars on her collar marking her rank. "Commander Rodriguez report," Lisa said without turning around. Beth Rodriguez looked up from her station. The intelligence officer was younger than the admiral, with short black hair and sharp features. Her fingers moved quickly over the holographic displays, showing data about the alien civilizations. "The Elven homeworld is on high alert, Admiral. Their defense systems are powered up, but they have not targeted us yet. The Krillian ships in the system are taking aggressive positions, but they are not firing." Lisa nodded. "They remember us from the old stories. They are afraid." "Should they be afraid, Admiral?" asked the ship's navigator, Lieutenant Karen Mills. Lisa was quiet for a moment, thinking about the long journey that had brought humanity back to this part of the galaxy. 3,000 years ago, her ancestors had fled from their conquests, horrified by what they had become. They had spent centuries in the dark spaces between galaxies, healing their damaged souls and building a better society. "They should be cautious, Lieutenant, but they should not fear us. We are not the same humans who left here long ago." Dr. Amy Zhao entered the bridge carrying a datapad filled with information about the alien races. The xenobiologist was a small woman with kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. Her specialty was understanding other forms of life, and she had studied the elves and Krillians for years. "Admiral, I am picking up communication attempts from the planet. Someone is trying to establish contact using old diplomatic protocols." "Put it through, Doctor." A voice filled the bridge, speaking in the musical language of the elves. Dr. Zhao activated her translation device, and the words became clear. "Unknown vessels. This is Elder Counselor Lyralai Moonwhisper of the Ethermore High Council. You have entered our space without permission. State your intentions." Lisa stepped forward. This is Admiral Lisa Carter of the Human Colonial Navy. We come in peace, seeking dialogue with the civilized races of this galaxy. Silence filled the communication channel for several seconds. Then the elven voice returned, filled with shock and fear. Humans, the legends speak true. You have returned from the darkness. We have returned, but not as conquerors. We bring warnings of a greater threat that approaches from beyond the galactic rim. Dr. Amy Zhao launched her small scout ship from the Determination's hangar bay. The sleek vessel moved through space like a silver dart, heading toward the elven world. She had volunteered for first contact, knowing that her scientific background might help calm the fears of the alien races. As her ship entered the planet's atmosphere, Amy saw the beauty of the elven civilization. Crystal cities rose from green, forests, connected by bridges of pure light. The architecture seemed to grow from the landscape itself, as if the buildings were living things. Her sensors detected a small elven scout ship approaching. The vessel was beautiful, made of what looked like crystallized starlight. Amy opened a communication channel. "This is Dr. Amy Zhao of the Human Fleet. I request permission to meet with your representatives." The reply came from a young female voice. "This is Mira Starweaver of the Ethermore Scout Corps. I will guide you to a safe landing site." Amy followed the elven ship to a clearing near one of the crystal cities. As she stepped out of her vessel, she saw an elf walking toward her. Mira was tall and graceful, with green hair that seemed to move in a wind that Amy could not feel. Her pointed ears and glowing eyes marked her as one of the legendary forest. "Folk, you are really human," Mira said in wonder. "I thought you were only stories. We are real, and we have been watching from afar for a long time." Amy held up her hands to show she carried no weapons. "My people have changed much since the old wars." Mira studied the human woman carefully. Amy was shorter than an elf, with brown skin and kind eyes. She wore a simple uniform with scientific instruments attached to her belt. She did not look like the terrible warriors from the ancient stories. "Why have you returned?" Mira asked. Before Amy could answer, the sky filled with new ships. Krillian battlecruisers dropped out of hyperspace, their weapon systems charging. The lead vessel was twice the size of the others, its hull covered in war markings. "Captain Zara," Voidstrider's voice boomed from the Krillian ships. "Human vessel, you will surrender immediately or face destruction." Amy looked up at the threatening ships, then back at Mira. "This is why we have returned. The galaxy has forgotten how to face real threats while fighting among themselves." More Krillian ships arrived, forming an attack formation around Amy's scout vessel. Their weapons powered up with dangerous energy that made the air itself hum. "Dr. Zhao," Admiral Carter's voice came through Amy's communicator. "Return to your ship immediately." "No, Admiral. If I run now, they will never trust us." Amy turned to Mira. "Your people and the Krillians, do you work together?" "Sometimes. When there are threats to trade or peace." Mira looked worried as more alien ships filled the sky. Amy nodded and activated her emergency beacon. Above the planet, the human fleet began to move. But instead of taking attack positions, the massive ships formed a protective formation around the world itself. Admiral Carter's voice filled the air as she broadcast on all frequencies. "This is the Human Colonial Navy. We claim no territory and threaten no one, but we will defend ourselves and any who seek our protection." The largest Krillian ship, commanded by General Kess Ironscale, moved closer to the human fleet. The Krillian general was known throughout the galaxy as a fierce warrior who had never lost a battle. "Humans," General Ironscale's voice was filled with anger. "You dare return to our space? You will pay for the sins of your ancestors!" Captain Nicole Stone of the UHS Retribution received new orders from Admiral Carter. The young captain had trained her entire life for combat, but these orders were different from anything she had expected. "All ships," Nicole broadcast to the human fleet. "Prepare quantum disruptors. Non-lethal settings only. We disable but do not destroy." The Krillian fleet attacked first, their plasma cannons lighting up space with deadly fire, but the human ships moved like dancers, avoiding the attacks with impossible grace. Their response was swift and precise. Blue energy beams reached out from the human vessels, touching each Krillian ship for just a moment. One by one, the alien ships went dark, their power systems shut down by technology they could not understand. On the planet below, Mira watched in amazement as the entire Krillian fleet was disabled in less than 5 minutes. No ships were destroyed. No lives were lost. The humans had won the battle without killing anyone. How? Mira whispered. Amy smiled sadly. We learned long ago that victory without mercy is no victory at all. We could have destroyed them, but we chose not to. Above them, Admiral Carter opened communication with the disabled Krillian fleet. General Ironscale, your ships will be restored to full power in 1 hour. We hope this demonstration shows that we seek peace, not war. Mira looked at the human woman beside her. These were not the monsters from the old stories. These were people who had learned to fight without hatred. But even as she thought this, her grandmother's warning echoed in her mind. The humans had returned for a reason. And if the old texts were correct, their return meant something terrible was coming from the dark spaces between the stars. General Kess Ironscale floated in her command chair aboard the Krillian battleship Warbringer, her 6 eyes burning with rage. The massive warrior stood 12 feet tall, her black scales scarred from countless battles. 2 rows of spines ran down her back, and her clawed hands gripped the armrests of her chair hard enough to leave marks. "How dare they humiliate us?" she growled to her bridge crew. "Restore power to all systems. We attack again in 10 minutes. Captain Zara Voidstrider stood beside her general, but her yellow eyes showed doubt. "General, perhaps we should listen to what they have to say. They disabled our entire fleet without destroying a single ship." "Weakness," Ironscale snapped. "They show weakness by not finishing what they started. We will teach them the price of mercy." The Krillian fleet powered up again as promised by the humans. Admiral Carter had kept her word, returning control to ships that had just attacked her forces. Ironscale saw this as proof that humans had grown soft during their long absence. "All ships, battle formation 7. Target the largest human vessel, maximum firepower." The Krillian fleet moved into attack position, their weapons charging for a second assault. But this time, Captain Nicole Stone of the UHS Retribution was ready for them. Nicole stood on her bridge watching the alien ships approach. At 32 years old, she was one of the youngest ship captains in the human fleet. Her red hair was tied back in a tight bun, and her blue eyes showed the calm focus of a trained warrior. "Admiral Carter is giving us permission to demonstrate our full capabilities," Nicole told her crew. "Prepare the quantum cascade disruptors." "Captain," her weapons officer Lieutenant Janet Price asked, "are you sure about this? That weapon has never been tested in actual combat. The Krillians need to understand that we are not the same humans they remember from the old stories. Sometimes the best way to prevent a war is to show your enemy that they cannot win." The second Krillian attack came with even more fury than the first. Hundreds of plasma bolts and particle beams struck the human ship's shields, lighting up space with deadly energy. But the Retribution did not even shake under the assault. Nicole's finger hovered over the firing control. "1 ship, 1 shot. Non-lethal disable of their entire fleet." The quantum cascade disruptor fired a single blue beam that struck General Ironscale's flagship. The energy spread from ship to ship through the Krillian fleet like lightning jumping between metal rods. In 3 seconds, every alien vessel went dark and began drifting in space. On the planet below, Mira stood with Dr. Amy Zhao watching the battle through a crystal viewing screen. The young elf could hardly believe what she was seeing. 1 shot. "Disabled an entire fleet," Mira whispered. "What kind of weapons do you humans have?" Amy looked sad as she watched the drifting Krillian ships. "The kind we hoped we would never have to use again. 3,000 years ago, our ancestors built weapons that could destroy entire star systems. We have learned to build weapons that save lives instead." Mira thought about her grandmother's words from the ancient books. "The old texts say humans were destroyers. They say you conquered worlds and enslaved races. Some of us did terrible things," Amy admitted. "But we learned from our mistakes. We spent centuries in exile, building a better society. We came back not to conquer, but to protect." "Protect from what?" Before Amy could answer, alarms began sounding across the planet. The crystal viewing screen showed new energy readings at the edge of the star system. Something massive was coming through hyperspace. Commander Rachel Kim materialized on the planet's surface using human transport technology. The military historian was a tall woman with gray-streaked black hair and serious dark eyes. She carried a datapad filled with information that would change everything the aliens thought they knew about the galaxy. Dr. Zhao, Admiral Carter requests your immediate return to the fleet. We have detected advanced scouts of the Devourer fleets. Mira looked confused. What are Devourers? Rachel Kim activated her datapad, showing holographic images that made Mira step backward in fear. The holograms showed mechanical creatures the size of small ships, their bodies made of black metal and red energy. They moved through space in vast swarms, consuming everything in their path. 3,000 years ago, humanity's home galaxy was invaded by these creatures. They are not alive in any way we understand. They exist only to consume and replicate. They destroyed our original homeworld and chased us across the void between galaxies. Amy looked up at the sky where the human fleet was moving into new defensive positions. We thought we had escaped them, but our monitoring stations detected their approach 6 months ago. They have found us again. Elder Lyra Moon Whisper arrived at the meeting site with a group of other elven counselors. The ancient elf looked even older than her 3,000 years as she listened to Rachel Kim's explanation. You are saying that these Devourers are the reason you disappeared from our galaxy? Not the only reason, Rachel admitted. We also left because we had become something we did not want to be. We were conquerors and destroyers, just like the stories say. But the Devourer invasion showed us what real evil looked like. It forced us to change. Ambassador Tara Wells beamed down from the human fleet to join the growing gathering. The chief diplomat was a woman in her 50s, with silver hair and kind eyes. She had spent her career learning to talk to alien races and build bridges between different peoples. Representatives of the Galactic Coalition, Tara addressed the group. Humanity formally requests alliance with your civilizations, the Devourer. Fleets will reach the Outer Rim systems within 10 days. Together we might stand against them. Apart, we will all fall. Captain Zara Voidstrider, who had been rescued from her disabled ship by human transport, spoke up. Why should we trust you? How do we know this is not some human trick to reclaim your old empire? Before anyone could answer, the crystal viewing screen lit up with new images. 3 Devourer scout ships had breached the galaxy's outer barrier and were attacking a mining colony in the Vega system. The scout ships were smaller than the main Devourer vessels, but each one was still the size of a human battleship. They moved through space like hungry predators, their black hulls absorbing all light. Red energy beams reached out from their weapon ports, touching the colony's defense stations. But the beams were not weapons in any normal sense. Where they touched, metal and stone began to change. The colony's structures twisted and reformed, becoming part of the attacking ships. The Devourers were not just destroying the colony. They were eating it. By the ancient stars, Elder Lirala gasped. They consume everything. Now you understand, Amy said quietly. This is why we came back. This is why we have been preparing for 3,000 years. Mira watched the horror on the screen, seeing entire buildings dissolve and flow into the Devourer ships like liquid metal. How many of them are there? Rachel Kim's face was grim as she showed new data. Our long-range sensors detect at least 10,000 ships in the main fleet. Each one is the size of a small moon, and behind them something our sensors cannot fully read. Something so large it bends space around itself. The Vega colony went silent as the last of its structures were consumed by the Devourer scouts. 3 million people had lived and worked there. Now there was only empty space and the growing bulk of the enemy ships. Ambassador Tara Wells looked at the assembled alien leaders. The question is not whether you trust us. The question is whether you want your people to suffer the same fate as that colony. General Kess Ironscale, who had been brought to the planet after her ship was disabled, spoke for the first time since the battle. What do you propose, humans? A joint defense force, Tara replied. Your knowledge of local space combined with our military technology, Every ship, every world working together to stop this invasion. Elder Lyrelai was quiet for a long moment. Then she made a decision that would change the course of galactic history. I will open the sealed archives. There are weapons hidden in this galaxy, weapons from the first human war that were never used. But they can only be activated by both human and elven technology working together. Mira looked at her grandmother in shock. You said those weapons were destroyed. I said they were sealed, Area Dawnkeeper corrected as she joined the group, hidden where neither human ambition nor alien fear could reach them. But if the Devourers have truly returned, then perhaps it is time to unseal what should have remained, hidden. Above them, the human fleet was already moving toward the outer rim systems, preparing to face an enemy that had once destroyed entire galaxies. The Age of Legends was ending. The Age of Alliance was about to begin. Captain Mary Torres gripped the command chair of her destroyer as the ship shook under enemy fire. The UHS Guardian was part of a mixed fleet defending Velen Prime, a wealthy trade world with 40 million inhabitants. Around her, alien ships fought desperately against the first major Devourer assault. Mary was a veteran of many battles, her brown hair now streaked with gray and her face marked by years of command decisions. But she had never faced an enemy like this. The Devourers did not fight like any normal force. They did not try to capture territory or destroy military targets. They simply consumed everything they touched. Captain, the Krillian battle line is collapsing, reported her tactical officer, Lieutenant Susan Clark. Their weapons are barely scratching the Devourer hulls. Through the main screen, Mary watched a Krillian cruiser fire its most powerful plasma cannons at a Devourer ship. The energy beams struck the black metal hull and simply disappeared, absorbed into the enemy vessel like water soaking into sand. All ships fall back to defensive position 7, Mary commanded. Cover the evacuation transports. The combined fleet was a strange sight. Human destroyers flew alongside elven crystal ships and Krillian battle cruisers. Dozens of other alien races had sent their vessels to help defend Velen Prime, but their different technologies and tactics made coordination difficult. Captain Zara Voidstrider commanded her own ship in the defensive line, her 4 arms moving quickly over the control systems. The Krillian warrior had learned to respect human military skill, but she was frustrated by the retreat. Torres, why do we run from these metal demons? Let us attack with full force. Because full force is not enough, Mary replied over the communication channel. Watch what happens when they get close to any ship. A small alien patrol craft made the mistake of approaching one of the Devourer vessels. Red energy beams reached out and touched the little ship. Within seconds, the patrol craft began to change. Its hull twisted and flowed like liquid, becoming part of the Devourer vessel. The crew's final screams cut off as their ship ceased to exist. Mira Starweaver watched the battle from the bridge of an elven transport ship. She was helping coordinate the evacuation of civilians from the planet below. Her scout ship had been equipped with human translation technology so she could communicate with refugees from dozens of different races. How many people are still on the surface? She asked the transport captain. 15 million in the main cities. The Devourers will reach the planet in 4 hours. Mira closed her eyes and tried not to think about what would happen to those people if they could not be evacuated in time. The Devourers did not take prisoners. They consumed all organic matter and converted it into more of themselves. Dr. Amy Zhao was on the planet's surface, working with alien medical teams to load wounded civilians onto evacuation ships. She moved between the refugee camps, her scanner, identifying people who needed immediate medical attention. Dr. Zhao, called a small reptilian alien. My children. I cannot find my children. Amy knelt beside the frightened parent. What do they look like? I will help you search. Around them, the evacuation continued in desperate haste. Military transports designed to carry supplies were packed with families fleeing the approaching horror. Human soldiers worked alongside alien security forces to maintain order and prevent panic. But in the sky above, the battle was going badly. The combined fleet was fighting a fighting withdrawal, trying to delay the Devourer advance long enough for the evacuation to complete. Admiral Katie Brooks arrived with the main human battle fleet just as the first evacuation ships began lifting off from the planet. The admiral was a woman in her 60s with steel-gray hair and eyes that had seen too many wars. "Captain Torres, report," Katie commanded as her flagship took position in the defensive line. "The enemy has 12 major vessels and approximately 300 smaller craft. Our weapons are having minimal effect. We estimate 4 hours until they reach the planet." Katie studied the tactical display, her experienced eye taking in the flow of battle. The Devourers were not fighting like a normal military force. They moved in patterns that seemed random until you realized they were positioning themselves to consume the maximum amount of material. All human ships implement Formation Delta. Alien vessels maintain current positions and provide covering fire. The human fleet began to move in a complex pattern that confused the alien commanders, but had a clear purpose. Each ship took position to create overlapping fields of fire while maintaining escape routes for the evacuation transports. Colonel Janet Price led a joint ground force that was holding the spaceports on Velen Prime. The human special forces commander worked with alien troops to defend the landing sites where evacuation ships were loading refugees. "Incoming Devourer drop pods," called out her Krillian second-in-command, Sergeant Vex Ironfoot. The drop pods were not like normal military craft. They were living metal spheres that burrowed into the ground like seeds. Where they landed, the EI soil itself began to change, becoming a gray metallic substance that spread outward in growing circles. "Fall back to Perimeter 2, Janet ordered. "Do not let that substance touch you." The defending troops retreated as the metallic infection spread across the spaceport. But even as they pulled back, they continued to cover the evacuation ships. Human soldiers carried alien children to safety, while Krillian warriors provided heavy fire support. On one of the evacuation transports, Mira found herself working alongside a human medic named Nurse Patricia Lee. The young woman was treating refugees from a dozen different species, her medical scanner automatically adjusting for alien biology. "How do you know how to treat all these different people?" Mira asked. "We studied your races for 3,000 years, Patricia replied as she bandaged a wounded alien trader. "We wanted to be ready to help when we returned." "You planned this? You knew you would come back?" Patricia paused in her work. "We hoped we would never have to come back, but we prepared for the worst while hoping for the best." The evacuation continued for 3 more hours, but it was clear that not everyone would escape in time. Millions of people were still on the planet when the Devourer fleet reached the outer atmosphere. Admiral Brooks made the hardest decision of her career. "All ships begin full retreat. We cannot save the planet, but we can save the people we have already evacuated." Captain Mary Torres watched her sensors as the last evacuation ships lifted off from the doomed world. "Admiral, there are still 6 million people down there." "I know, Captain. But if we stay to fight a battle we cannot win, we will lose the ships needed to defend other worlds." The combined fleet began its withdrawal, covering the evacuation transports as they fled towards safer systems. Behind them, Velen Prime began to change. The Devourer ships descended to the planet's surface, and their consuming beams reached out to touch cities and forests. Within hours, the green and blue world became a gray ball of metallic substance. 40 million people had lived there. Now it was raw material for building more Devourer ships. On the transport carrying refugees, Mira sat with a group of alien children who had lost their parents in the evacuation. She held a small Krillian, youngling who kept asking when they could go home. "Will we ever stop them?" Mira asked Amy, who was sitting nearby. Amy looked out the transport's window at the human fleet. The massive ships moved in formation around the fleeing civilians, their crews working around the clock to protect the survivors. "Yes," Amy said quietly. "But first we have to learn to fight as one people instead of dozens of separate races. The Devourers are strong because they are unified. We will only defeat them if we become unified too." Captain Zara Voidstrider opened a communication channel to the human flagship. "Admiral Brooks, I owe you an apology. My people called you cowards for showing mercy in our first battle. Now I understand. You were saving your strength for when it truly mattered. Captain, we all have much to learn about fighting this enemy, but we will learn together." Elder Arya Dawnkeeper transmitted new information from Aether Moor. "The sealed archives are open. We have found the location of the ancient weapon caches. But the security systems require both human and elven operators working in perfect harmony. Admiral, Brooks looked at the tactical display showing Devourer fleets spreading across the galaxy like an infection. Then we had better learn harmony quickly, because this is only the beginning. On Velen Prime, the last traces of a thriving civilization disappeared into the gray metallic substance that now covered the planet. The Devourers had claimed their first major victory, but they had also shown the galaxy what unity in the face of total extinction looked like. The real war was about to begin. Fleet Admiral Susan Gray stood in the command center of the massive station that orbited the galactic core. Around her, representatives from 50 different species worked at control stations, coordinating the largest military force in galactic history. The woman who now commanded this incredible fleet was 60 years old, her black hair completely gray, and her dark eyes showing the weight of protecting an entire galaxy. "Status report from all sectors," Susan commanded. The responses came in from across the galaxy. Human dreadnoughts worked alongside elven crystal ships powered by stellar energy. Krillian swarm fighters flew in formation with graceful alien vessels from races that had never cooperated before. The diversity that had once divided the galaxy was now its greatest strength. Sector 7 reports Devourer fleets massing near the Arcturus system, called out Lieutenant Helen Davis from her communication station. They estimate 40 enemy ships. Sector 12 has completed evacuation of the Tango colonies. 3 million civilians safely relocated to core worlds. Susan studied the holographic display that showed the entire galaxy. Red dots marked Devourer positions, while blue dots showed the Allied fleet. The enemy had captured nearly 100 systems, but their advance had finally been slowed. "Commander, patch me through to the Harmony. I need to speak with the recovery team." The UHS Harmony was unlike any ship that had ever been built. Part human technology and part elven crystal growth. It existed in both normal space and the quantum realm simultaneously. The vessel could travel to places that normal ships could never reach. Mira Starweaver commanded the bridge of this impossible ship, her elven heritage allowing her to interface with the crystal systems while human technology protected her from the quantum energies. At her side stood Dr. Amy Zhao, whose scientific knowledge helped interpret the ancient weapon systems they were seeking. "Admiral Gray, this is the Harmony," Mira reported. "We have reached the galactic core. The ancient facility is exactly where the Elven Archives said it would be." Through the ship's crystal viewports, the team could see the hidden installation. It hung in space near the galaxy's central black hole, protected by technology that bent gravity itself. The structure was enormous, built from materials that seemed to shift between metal and energy. "The security systems are responding to our approach," reported Engineer Patricia Lee from her control station. "I am reading both human and elven lock mechanisms." Captain Zara Voidstrider, who had volunteered for the dangerous mission, checked her weapons one final time. "What if the Devourers followed us here?" "Then we complete the mission anyway," Mira replied. "This is our only chance to find weapons that can unmake them at the quantum level." The Harmony docked with the ancient facility using mechanical arms that extended from both ships. The airlock cycled and the team moved into a corridor that had not seen visitors for 3,000 years. The interior of the facility was a maze of chambers filled with technology that blended human engineering with elven crystal matrices. Emergency lighting activated as they entered, casting strange shadows on walls covered with alien symbols. "This way," Amy said, following readings on her scanner. "The weapon-controlled chamber should be at the center of the facility." They moved through rooms filled with devices that hurt to look at directly. Some weapons existed partially outside normal reality, their edges fading into dimensions that human eyes could not perceive. "These were built during the first human war," Patricia whispered as she examined a device that seemed to be made of crystallized time. "Our ancestors and the elves worked together to create things that should not exist." At the center of the facility, they found a chamber dominated by a sphere of pure energy suspended between metal and crystal supports. The sphere pulsed with power that made the air itself sing with harmonics. "The Quantum Unraveler," Mira read, from ancient elven text carved into the walls. "A weapon that can undo the basic forces that hold matter together." Amy approached the control systems, her scientific instruments detecting energies that registered on no known scale. According to these readings, this device could unmake the Devourer ships at the molecular level, but using it would require. She stopped speaking as she read further into the technical specifications. Require what? Zara demanded. A living consciousness. To guide the quantum energies, someone would have to merge their mind with the weapon system to control its power. Back at the command station, Admiral Gray watched the tactical display as Devourer fleets began their final assault on the galaxy's core systems. Hundreds of the massive enemy ships moved in perfect coordination, their black hulls absorbing the light of stars. All fleet elements prepare for engagement, Susan commanded. This is the battle that will decide the fate of every living thing in the galaxy. The combined fleet moved to meet the enemy at the galaxy's rim, where the last defensive line had been established. Human dreadnoughts took point positions, while alien support ships provided covering fire and electronic warfare. But even with their combined might, the Allied fleet was outnumbered 10-1. The Devourer ships were also larger and more powerful than when the war began, having consumed dozens of worlds to increase their strength. On the ancient facility, Mira made the decision that would define her place in galactic history. I will interface with the weapon system. My elven consciousness can handle the quantum energies better than human minds. No, Amy protested. The energy levels will destroy your neural pathways. You will not survive the process. Then I will not survive alone, said a new voice. Elder Lyrelai Moonwhisper materialized in the chamber, having used elven transport technology to reach the facility. Behind her came several other ancient elves and 3 human volunteers led by Admiral Lisa Carter. This weapon was built by our ancestors working together, Lyrelai explained. It can only be controlled by our peoples working together, even if that cooperation costs us our lives. The volunteers took their positions around the energy sphere, each one placing their hands on control surfaces that had waited 3,000 years for this moment. Human technology merged with elven consciousness as the weapon powered up. All fleet elements withdraw to minimum safe distance, Admiral Gray commanded, as energy readings from the galactic core began registering on sensors throughout the galaxy. The quantum unraveler fired not as a beam or projectile, but as a wave of altered reality that spread outward at the speed of thought. Where it touched the Devourer ships, the fundamental forces that held their matter together simply stopped working. The massive enemy vessels did not explode or burn. They simply ceased to exist, their atoms scattered back into the quantum foam, from which all matter originally came. The wave continued outward, reaching every Devourer ship in the galaxy simultaneously. In less than 5 minutes, an invasion force that had threatened to consume all life was reduced to empty space and drifting particles. But the victory came at a terrible price. The volunteers who had controlled the weapon gave their lives to guide its power. Elder Lyrelai and Admiral Carter, along with their companions, merged their consciousness with the quantum energies and became part of the fabric of space itself. 6 months later, Mira stood on the observation deck of a new space station built jointly by human and alien engineers. She wore the uniform of the 1st Interspecies Defense Force, an organization that would ensure such a threat never caught the galaxy unprepared again. Commander Davis, are you ready for the first joint exploration mission beyond the Galactic Rim? Mira asked. Helen Davis, who now commanded a ship crewed by members of 12 different species, nodded. The new sensor arrays are online. We will know if anything like the Devourers approaches our galaxy long before they arrive. Dr. Amy Zhao, now Director of Interspecies Scientific Cooperation, joined them at the observation window. The memorial gardens are complete. People from every world that was saved will be able to visit and remember those who sacrificed everything. Through the transparent aluminum window, they could see ships from across the galaxy working together to build a better future. Human vessels shared their advanced technology, while alien races contributed their unique knowledge and perspectives. Do you think they would be proud of what we have built? Mira asked, thinking of the volunteers who had given their lives to save the galaxy. Amy smiled as she watched a group of human and alien children playing together in the station's recreational areas. I think they would be amazed that enemies could become family so quickly when faced with a common threat. Admiral Jennifer Walsh, who now commanded the combined exploration fleets, approached their group. The first deep space mission launches tomorrow. We will map the regions beyond our galaxy and establish monitoring stations to watch for any future threats. Captain Zara Voidstrider, now serving as the military liaison between species, added her own thoughts. The Devourers taught us that isolation makes us weak. Only by working together can we become strong enough to face whatever the universe sends against us. Mira looked out at the stars, thinking about how much had changed since the day human ships had first appeared in the skies above Ethermoor. The legends of humanity as destroyers had been replaced by new stories of humans as protectors and teachers. The age of legends is over, she said quietly. The age of cooperation has begun. In the depths of space, the quantum echoes of the volunteers, sacrifice continued to protect the galaxy, their consciousness woven into the fabric of reality itself. They had become legends, not through conquest or destruction, but through the greatest act of cooperation in galactic history. Humanity had returned to the galaxy not as the monsters from ancient stories, but as the friends and allies that all sentient beings needed to face an uncertain universe together. The war was over, but the work of building a better galaxy had only just begun.